Guys, we are going old school. Handheld GoPro Hero 4 with the external mic like we did back in the day. If the audio is crap, you won't even see this, but assuming it's tolerable, we're going to send it, and I continue showing you the next steps in this process, which is right here behind me. I have to install my wiring harness. I had it out for a while. It actually had a connector melt. We shipped it off to Wiring Specialties, and huge shout out to them because they replaced it for free, which was awesome. Just the damaged portion. And so they've got that back to me. It's here on the table. And so one of the next big projects is going to be to make this go back into the car. As you can see, there's a little bit to it. And these are going to be the challenge points. These three big connectors, two for the ECU and then my fuse block, all have to fit in this little hole, which is not the worst thing ever. But if we come inside the car, what is the worst thing ever is the fact that my car has a beautiful full interior. And that means literally everything is under here and in the way. So if we slide under the glove box and take a look up in here, the problem is really that the fan motor is still installed. And so I'm going to try to get that out. You see, somehow, when we first installed this engine swap, my dad and I were able to get this wiring harness routed in through tons of patience. I think we probably loosened the fan motor and we were able to wiggle things through. Our hands were all cut up and bloody from like ripping things around up in there. But you can't see what you're doing. You know, your own hands get in the way of seeing the wire come through. So it's all done by feel. It's totally miserable. I don't recommend. It's one of the few times where having a car with a nice interior still intact in 2021 actually becomes a downside. And even when you go online to kind of see what tricks people use, nobody's got interior anymore, like not that much. And so it's pretty uncommon to find useful information about stuff like this. I'm just going to see what I can do to get the glove off, and then hopefully I'll have room to access that fan, and we're just going to go ahead and pull that. I really don't use it anymore. The car is pretty much a vehicle that gets driven for motorsports events, and if I cruise, it's usually on a decent enough day. I'm willing to accept the fact that if I have to sweat a little bit because it's a little warm outside, that's just the car life. Right, so first up is the glove box. Oh, I forget how to do this. Get some lights and look around. It's gonna be good times. All right, well, we're gonna start by just taking stuff apart and seeing what happens. Let's see, there's one more of those over here, I'm sure. I never thought I would need a longer screwdriver, but I sure do. Now this is not what I expected this process would be like. All right, we should be pretty close here. There must be a light plug in the back somewhere. Nope, there's not. Oh, sweet. This is going to be way easier than I had feared it might be. Because basically, this has got to go. It's horribly in the way. And who knows about what that'll become. I don't use that anyway. It's not even hooked up. I believe that's the heater core. What a mess this is. So we've got the fan motor here. I'm going to try and figure out how to pull that. Pretty sure this is a heater core. Calsonic, that's kind of cool. So I'm just gonna start pulling stuff and we'll see what happens. Probably not gonna document it too closely, it'd be boring to watch anyway. Step one will be to pull electronics if I can. I may have to get some tools for that. I'm always really bad at pulling these small connectors, but as much as possible, those have got to go. All right, I think that's got all of our electronics out of the way. I can probably drop the fan off from here, it looks like, by flipping all of those. And when I say those, I mean these little metal tabs. If I can find enough of them, odds are something about that will drop off. I'm just gonna have to eyeball it and see. It's funny, guys, we live in this internet age where you can look all this stuff up, but both this car and me predate all that. And so, rather than look it up, we do things the old-fashioned way, which is that we look at them, we figure out how we think they go together, and then we start messing with stuff until we get it to work, or until we break it and get confused. There's one over here in the corner. And now I've got to crawl around because I sure can't see anything. Next up in the list of things I'm guessing at, there are 3 little bolts here, which we're going to pull down and get this at least set out of the way, which will hopefully give us more room to figure everything out. Let's see what is behind here. 1991 was when this was assembled. It's never been off the car. I have no idea how deep this thing is. Looks like it's deeper than I've got room. So all signs point to this will not be what comes off first. Because with the dash on, unless it has a fair bit of flex right here, I suppose I can explore how much flex there is in this old Nissan plastic. All right, with that off, does this move much? There's a metal piece though. What holds the metal piece on, huh? The metal part is not coming off, that's for darn sure. But I don't mind ramming up against the metal part as long as I'm not gonna hurt the plastic. So let me see again if that changes this equation at all. We're gonna put on gloves so that our hands are protected and see if I can't just bend this. I think I can, out of the way. All right, fan motor, which has somehow ingested a leaf from God knows when. We got more room, more visibility. That's always good. A quick update, the other end of this hose just pulls off. You may not be able to see it, but right back here, there's a connector for it. So our fan motor is out of the way. Next up, I'm just going to start taking nuts and bolts off. We're gonna start with these bottom 2. We're gonna pull that. There's a couple top ones that are small gold ones. We're gonna pull all of those. And we're just gonna see what happens. My hope is that this thing will drop down for us. We're gonna start with these bottom 2. We'll get them started and then just go by hand. Ziplocs or some sort of container are your friend here. You don't want to lose these parts. In case you ever want to reinstall them, it's at least nice to know what they came off of. Moving on, we've got this bolt. I think I'm going to leave this bolt until last. I'm just going to loosen it because it's going to be what holds everything on while we pull the rest of this down. All right, small gold bolts. Here comes our first one. There's a second one. And there's a third black one right here, which I think this is in 2 pieces. So if I can pull enough of these bolts, it may just come off as is. This may not be necessary, but we're just going to give it the full spectacular here. Is that loose enough yet? You know, it might be. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this bolt, and we're gonna see how much wiggle room we get, if any. I think this is actually loose, and it's just that the heater core is in the way. So that's going to shift our focus over to here. Oh gosh, let's see what all holds this bad boy in place. Starting off, we've got these 2 big bolts. I like big bolts and I cannot lie. All right, we'll go ahead and pull those and then we'll start wiggling stuff and see where we get. I try to loosen as much as I can before I actually take stuff apart. Because generally, when everything is tightened together, you have the most leverage. The part doesn't wiggle around as much. There's a large bolt. We'll see how bass-ackwards I can do this entire process. Here's a large bolt. We scooting yet? No, it is rock solid. All right, so we'll find some more bolts and take them off. I'm not surprised to find that there's one on the bottom, way down here. So we'll pull it. There's 3 large identical bolts. Any movement yet? No, it is still rock solid. So the next thing we're gonna try, I have noticed that there is a seam along here with a series of bolts that hold it together. So anything connected to that seam, I'm gonna loosen. And I'm just gonna see if I can separate the bottom half, because again, I need to get the fan motor to the right off. That's the real objective here. Okay, there goes the thing. That must be some sort of oh, it's a thermostat, I bet. This is definitely the heater core. Kind Kind of cool. You can see in there, it's like a miniature radiator. Your engine's coolant is going to pass through that. It's going to be heated, obviously. And so when you turn on the heat, it's going to force air through there, and that is going to blow heated air out of your vents. That's how your heater works as far as the interior of the car is concerned. It's kind of sketch though, because hot coolant is circulating through the interior of your car. So that kind of sucks. If you end up having a leak, which is possible, they can break. It ends up being a little bit of a pain. Okay, I think we're all good on the bottom half there. So we will go ahead and pull these 4 small vertical screws. I may have removed some extra stuff that I didn't have to mess with. That's not a problem. The bright side to this is I don't actually have to have this go back together, but I'm gonna try and do it in a way that I could if I wanted to, for 2 reasons. 1, I'm just meticulous like that. And 2, if somebody's watching this that has an awesome 240 that's in amazing shape with a full interior, and you just want this car to go the distance and be beautiful forever, I want to help you if I can. You know, like, I have a drift car, and drift cars have a rough life. They get the crap beaten out of them constantly. Mine is no exception, but I'm trying to keep it as nice as I can within that lens of for a drift car. But if this video can help you out in any way, shape, or form, as you're trucking through this super, super long, meticulous, boring, not fun to watch crap, it means you're a real 240 owner, and I salute you. We should be about done with all the fasteners that I've spotted here. It wiggles a little bit, but it is going to be held in place by that. And I'm just going to give you a life tip here. The next time you have a Christmas or a birthday coming up, anything where you're going to get a present, Father's Day, have your family buy you a set of gear wrenches. They have these little sockets built in because they make life so easy when you're working in tight spaces like this, so that you can get stuff started and removed. They're worth whatever they cost at the moment, I promise you. This is all still very solid. It's molded together in some way that it all comes off to a degree together. So I gotta keep looking. I feel like Indiana Jones going through a temple trying not to trip all the traps as I work around all this old early 90s plastic. It's it's definitely an experience, and I'm sure many people have had it before me. I took forever to finally pop the cherry on fooling with this car's interior, even though I want to cage it later for safety at some bigger tracks I want to run. It's a little scary working on these car interior plastics because there's a 2-step process. Number 1, you identify key fasteners, bolts, screws, whatever, that hold it together. And then number 2, you just have to apply some good old-fashioned elbow grease. You just pull because they either snap apart or they like press fit and then they're bolted in place on top of that. I didn't end up taking anything else off, but I think we're to the point where now I just yank this thing loose. So we're gonna give that a go. Pretty sure if I give it a pull this way from the side, we can wiggle it mostly loose. Ooh, yes. Okay. Oh boy. Very nice. Look at all the visibility I have. I had started to pull it apart at the seam here. It wasn't even necessary, so there you go. I'll put those screws back in, and here we have a pretty much as mint as you could get one that hasn't, unless it had never been installed and had never been used, heater core for an S13. So in the end, there were only about 4 screws that needed to come out for this to pull off. There's one here, there were 2 up at the top, and there's one down there at the bottom. It probably won't hold still for me to show you, but right here. There might have been one here, I don't really recall. That seems to be all that was needed. All these small stuff in the middle we could have left alone. But that is the OG learning process. That's how we all did this back in the 90s, and how I still do it today. Probably because I'm dumb and I just don't use the internet. But it was a fun experience, so there you go. If I had really gotten stumped, definitely would have gone to the internet and figured out the answer from somebody who's already done this before. As you can see, we've opened up all kinds of space, and now we're gonna focus back on our original goal, which is this fan motor here. I had been working by messing with all these hooks on getting it to come apart. I've discovered that there's exactly one left. It's hard to reach, and I'm gonna see if I can't just yeet it apart here, because with all the other ones gone, it will probably just pop loose on its own. I gotta make sure nothing important that I'm actually using is stuck on there. No, not gonna be a thing? All right then. Ah, I see it. There's one more screw. Oh, it's way in there. All right, we need the longest socket or screw ever. Way back in there. Gotcha. Haha. The feeling of triumph when you finally identify. As shit falls apart, that last bolt. So close. There's one little connector. Oh, everything's falling off now. Okay. Ah ha ha ha. Yes. There goes the fan motor housing. Oh, it's got a cute little flap to keep crap out the way when you're not running it. That is what I'm talking about. Now we can look up under the car and see all kinds of stuff. You can see projects I did from the top of the car. Let's look. So here's where all the wiring has to come through. That's gonna be the easiest job ever now. Part of me actually just wants to cut a hole straight through and make that an even bigger opening, but I don't have to worry about it. Up here, you can actually see where I have my kill switch wired at the moment. And unfortunately, some of these plastics are jacked. And the reason that they are is because when you're installing an LS swap into your 240, you have to hammer out the transmission tunnel. So you're taking a big, like, 5-pound sledge, just pounding all around the tunnel area right here to make it girthier. And unfortunately, those vibrations are not good on this plastic. So you can't really see this plastic, unlike the top of the dash, but a lot of this stuff took some damage as a result. While we were blacksmithing our way to fitting a Tremec T56 6-speed into the transmission tunnel originally intended for the very slim KA24 transmission. For this project, all that's left is to pop this little electronic piece loose. It's got one connector here, and now we're done. All right, that should be all the hard stuff. That's got our wiring harness all set. You can see here, it stretches out along the side of the car right now, and it goes through the chassis right there. Also where this duct tape is, there were 2 additional holes from the heater core, and I have filled those up because otherwise they let fumes and smoke up into the cabin. When you see drifting videos on YouTube and a guy does like 1 lap, and by the end of the lap he can barely breathe and he's got to open the door and get all the smoke out, that is because, usually in the back, but it's the same problem. There are holes in these chassis, especially when you take stuff out where bolts go through and stuff like that. And if you don't plug them, then smoke gets inside. Just be a little meticulous and you can do laps and laps and just have it be like slightly hazy as opposed to being a full-on lung cancer situation. So that's how I roll, and we've got it all buttoned up. Now we're gonna put the motor back together and then we can get this clutch on. Honestly, not a whole lot is needed to get this thing clean. I just need to go around all of these surfaces and make sure that they are nice and smooth, free from debris, which is going to be a multi-step process. We're going to start by getting all the initial grime off the top here. Then we'll go over it with a razor. And last but not least, we'll RTV this back together. Whew, gnarly. Now that we've gotten the surface pretty clean, we're going to be feeling along these surfaces. And here, for example, we'll be able to feel areas where a little bit of gasket material has gotten stuck on. And in the case that it has, we're just going to shave it off, like so. Make sure everything feels nice and flat. And we're going to be going around the entire pan that way. Something I should have done earlier was allow it to drain. There's just a little bit in the bottom of this pan, so I have set it up on its edge against some tires that I have. I may also give it a blast of brake cleaner just to help it get a little bit less gnarly to handle. I go through just a little bit of brake cleaner sometimes on these projects. The oil pan should be pretty much done draining now. We'll give it one last wipe down of the seal surface. I'll just go in here a little bit for good measure, although it won't matter too much. as far as this stuff is concerned. The oil filter will catch any grossness that's in here. That is what it is for, after all. This is probably overkill, but something that I like to do is clean my bolts before I reinstall them, especially for these little small fine thread bolts. So you see this one, it's got a bunch of gunk on it. Some of that you could probably peel off with your hands. Here's how I do it. I make a ritual for the important bolts like the engine bolts out of always going through and cleaning them one at a time. There we go. It's nice and clean, and I know we won't have any issues at assembly. With our bolts nice and clean, and then sprayed down with some brake clean, nice and dry, we're ready to install the oil pan back on the motor here. So we're going to start by popping on this improved racing gasket, and you'll see how that goes now. The LS uses these nice kind of high-tech metal gaskets with rubber silicone seal built in. So we're going to line up all of our holes as best we can here, and then we're going to drive some bolts through here, and they will hold this in place. So we'll skip ahead, but you'll see I'm going to place these through. They're going to hold the gasket on when I turn this upside down to put it back on the engine. Now, as you can see, we've got the oil pan gasket. It's being sort of staked on by these bolts, so that's going to hold it in place. And now we're going to use some gasket maker. When you come over to the engine here, you're going to have 4 seams on the corners. You've got 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So we're going to put one line of gasket seal right here just as a precaution. As you can see, this does have the corners covered on all 4 sides, but it never hurts to have that little bit of extra security. And I like to use Ultra Black for this. It's a oil resistant silicone, since it's going to be right here in the oil pan, and I always like to use a new gasket maker bottle for something this important, plus I needed some anyway, so here we go. Pop this open, puncture the gasket seal there, and it's ready to use. Also, fun fact, I don't know if you've seen these before. One of my buddies who works automotive full-time told me about these. I'm not sure what they're called because he just hooked me up, but it's like a roll so that you can roll the container up, and it fits right in there because of that little lip. Sweet little thing. I assume it's called a tube roller or something, but if you guys know the actual name, drop it in the comments so that anybody who wants one can pick one up. Here you can see our final results for that gasket material. So we've got it right there, and there, all 4 corners. Now it's time for the moment of truth. So we're just using these to make sure that everything is aligned decently. Now that we have our oil pan back on, it's time to final torque. There was a little bit of a process involved there. So the instructions for the black silicone that you can see right here was to install these, finger tighten them until it starts to push the gasket material out, and then you wait about an hour and it gets a little bit tackier, a little bit firmer, and then you go to final torque. After that, do not use or fill with fluids for 24 hours, which at the pace that I'm able to work due to my day job and family stuff, as well as content creation, will not be an issue. So we're gonna go ahead and use our torque wrench here. And again, this is my rad torque wrench that is in inch pounds. So we have to just multiply by 12. If it says 18, we'll multiply by 12. That'll give us 216. So I'll set to around 220 and we will lock everything down. There are a couple, like these down here, that are gonna have to be done by feel. I like to grab one of these that we did tighten with the torque wrench and measure what it takes to move it just a hair. I don't think I'm gonna have to worry too much about ever tightening these because it's pretty firm. And the key is to just do your best and don't overthink it. But also, don't strip and break the bolts for your aluminum head motor. That's a bad time. And as we go through getting the feel for it, I go back and I do these again as I get more dialed in. Last but not least on my particular application are these 2 Allen bolts. I always save them for last. And they're the most difficult. Figure out how much torque they need. But we'll eyeball them and then we'll be all set. We also can't forget these 2 really long bolts. They only go to 106 inch-pounds. So we're going to open this up and dial it down. We're going to go to a little over 110. That is so gentle. I'm going to double check it. And with that, our wiring harness is done, our engine is repaired and ready to go back into the car. Next up, we'll be installing that monster clutch, 6-puck racing clutch onto the vehicle, and then putting the motor back in. I'm excited for that. But if you guys are tired of seeing all this car work and you want to see some action, check out this video where you can see some of my driving. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you would hit subscribe and like the video. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.